or IDA2 on the forward Harmony port to the IDA3 on the zenith or space-facing Harmony port. This will free up the forward port for the arrival of Boeing's Starliner on its upcoming Orbital Flight Test 2 or OFT-2 mission. We expect Dragon to push away from the station with NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Aki Hoshide on board at 5:40.
They're numbered from 1 to 4, from right to left when looking at the seats. From the other direction, so what we see on the screen now is actually 4 would be on our far left and number 1 would be on our far right. Shane is in seat number 2, there on the right-hand side, which is the commander seat, and Megan is beside him in seat 3, which for Crew Dragon is the pilot seat there on the left in front of them. In the unlikely event that we see an off-nominal scenario, the crew and the vehicle are prepared to deorbit and return home safely.
Now we're getting some views inside the cabin of Crew Dragon Endeavour. On the left there, commander of Crew Dragon Endeavour, Shane Kimbrough, and on the right of your screen, pilot Megan McArthur, and of course, Thomas Pesquet and Aki Hoshide flanking them on both sides. They're waiting. McArthur waited until they finished closing Dragon's hatch before suiting up. So about 3:30 a.m. Central Time, the 4 astronauts boarded Dragon for the port relocation maneuver. It wasn't too long after that, about 3:40 a.m. Central Time, 8:40 GMT, that Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur closed the Crew Dragon's hatch. They put their SpaceX spacesuits on, which will be worn throughout today's maneuver. You see them wearing them right now. And of course, once it took a while to get down to 5 pounds per square inch, or 5 psi. They allowed some time for thermal stabilization before performing some leak checks, and then are now in the process of continuing down from 5 psi down to vacuum. Very shortly here.
And physically separate from station. Dragon will slowly back off from station, which is illustrated there in the blue section that you see on your screen, and activate its LiDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging, to begin tracking the space station. Once it acquires a solid signal, the ground will command Dragon to hold approximately 60 meters away from station. Once everything looks good, Dragon will begin to move from in front of station to above it, and that's the yellow section there that we see transition maneuver. From there on, our times are approximate and will change in real time based on Dragon's performance. Around 5:54 Central or 10:54 GMT, Dragon will begin to maneuver towards the zenith port of Harmony and IDA3. We expect Dragon to take about 15 minutes to make the trip up above station with a check-in halfway, and you'll hear that called out as the midpoint. It'll stop and hold once it's 60 meters directly above the Node 2 zenith port and prepare for final approach, which is the purple section there on your screen.
Flight controllers in Hawthorne will once again command Dragon to begin its approach, flying in until it reaches waypoint 2, just 20 meters away from the station. Once Dragon reaches that 20-meter mark, it will hold one final time for our teams on the ground and astronauts on board the Dragon to do a final check before docking. There aren't any strict requirements to complete docking during the day or a night pass, but there is always the chance that they will hold to continue until lighting conditions on the docking port are ideal. Once ready, the Dragon will begin its final approach. Dragon will make initial contact with IDA-3, and its soft capture system will retract to bring the spacecraft in closer for a hard capture, which is accomplished by deploying 12 hooks to firmly hold Dragon in place. That process takes about 15 minutes.
After all docking events are successful, flight controllers will configure Dragon for docked operations, connecting power and data to the spacecraft once more. The crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits and set them up to dry and begin operations to get the hatches back open. This includes pressurizing the vestibule and a new round of leak checks. Depending on the exact timing, the crew has the option to have lunch inside.
Getting a look from the forward camera of Crew Dragon Endeavour today. That's looking at the docking target that NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei affixed to the APAS hatching of another commercial spacecraft built to carry humans, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. Here's the new docking location for today, and here's, of course, the Starliner that will be coming up on July 30th and arrive at the station about 24 hours later, launching on July 30th.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
Just momentarily.
All hooks open and nominal.
Okay, we see separation.
Separation is confirmed.
Another copy.
Okay, as you can see there, undocking confirmed of Crew Dragon Endeavour from the International Space Station on time at 5:45 a.m. Central, 10:45 GMT, while station and Dragon flew approximately 263 miles over the South Pacific, flying west of Chile.
Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Copy.
Dragon SpaceX on the big load. Relocate burn 0 complete.
Double copy.
Also heard the call out there that the relocate burn was complete. That was the final of the 3 burns of the service section Dracos performed. That final relocate burn lasted about 21 seconds.
I ain't to be traveled with. My attitude so jacked that I loaded a rapper with it. I can't be stopped. I'm a juggernaut anarchist. I can't look backward, looking forward to greatness. Hit so hard, I changed the name of the game. Nothing come close, no one ever the same. Legend the making.
Dragon already about 50 meters away from the station. It's heading to a 60-meter hold point before transferring to the new docking axis.
I'm gonna show you how a queen become a legend. I'm gonna show you how to level up to 10.
Dragon is working to acquire LiDAR tracking, which will be used by Dragon to autonomously execute this relocation maneuver. Like Gary mentioned before, we expect it to back straight away to about 60 meters.
From the external cameras of the International Space Station, you can see there in the distance the Crew Dragon holding. Teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room are busy not only monitoring Crew Dragon as it makes its way back to the 60-meter hold point, now at about just under 62 meters. We'll be arriving there shortly. They're also configuring the Crew Dragon Endeavour. First is Dragon Commander Shane Kimbrough. It is his third trip to space. He was born in Killeen, Texas, and raised in Atlanta, and was selected as an astronaut in 2004. Kimbrough is a retired U.S. Army colonel and holds degrees in aerospace engineering and operations research. He first launched aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour on STS-126, then aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft for Expedition 49 and 50. Kimbrough is the spacecraft commander for the Crew 2 flight and is a flight engineer for Expeditions 65 and 66 on station. In addition to the usual complement of science and maintenance work for our astronauts, he completed 3 spacewalks earlier this summer with Thomas Pesquet to install the first in a series of new solar arrays on the station, bringing his total spacewalk count to 9.
This mission marks pilot Megan MacArthur's second trip to space, but her first one to the space station. She was born in Honolulu, but considers California her home state. NASA selected MacArthur as an astronaut in 2000. She holds degrees in aerospace engineering and oceanography. MacArthur served as mission specialist aboard Space Shuttle Atlantis on STS-125, the final servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope in 2009. She operated the shuttle's robotic arm over the course of 12 days and 21 hours, capturing the telescope and maneuvering crew members throughout the 5 spacewalks to upgrade Hubble's science instruments, along with removal and replacement of other components to lengthen the telescope's life. MacArthur is Crew Dragon Endeavour's pilot for the Crew 2 mission and is serving as a flight engineer conducting science and maintenance for Expeditions 65 and 66 aboard the station.
Mission Specialist Aki Hoshide is currently on his 3rd trip to space. Born in Tokyo, Hoshide was selected as an astronaut in 1999 by the National Space Development Agency of Japan, known today as Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA. Hoshide earned degrees in aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering. He flew on STS-124 aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery to deliver and install Japan's science laboratory Kibo. He also flew aboard the Russian Soyuz on Expeditions 32 and 33 for a 124-day visit to the International Space Station. In 2014, he also served as commander of the 18th NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operation, an underwater expedition at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Aquarius habitat off of Florida's Key Largo coast. He now serves as the commander for the International Space Station for Expedition 65 and as a mission specialist for the Crew 2 flight.
Crew 2 is mission specialist Thomas Pesquet's 2nd trip to space. Born in Rouen, France, Pesquet was selected by ESA as an astronaut in 2009. He has a degree in spacecraft design and control and more than 2,300 flight hours as a commercial airline pilot. Pesquet first flew to space on the Soyuz as a flight engineer for Expeditions 50 and 51. In that time, he worked on more than 50 experiments and performed 2 spacewalks to maintain the space station. He has logged 197 days in space. Pesquet is the first European to fly in a Crew Dragon and the first European to launch from America in more than a decade. He's currently a flight engineer for Expedition 65 and will take over the role of station commander later this fall before returning to Earth with the rest of the Crew 2 astronauts.
Now, we will be getting some periodic views from the International Space Station during today's port relocation maneuver. The Dragon itself has maneuvered from the original docking access and past the midway point. We're now in the final stretch of the transition from the midway point, which is the halfway marker between the original docking access and the new one. And Dragon, you see now, is making its way to the new docking access on the space-facing side, really pointing right out towards the space. That's where the International Docking Adapter 3 is located. We're in the final stretch and now starting to get some views from the International Space Station of Crew Dragon Endeavour in the final stretch of this transition from the midway point to the new docking axis. In the final moments here, we're getting some questions using the hashtag AskNASA. Please keep sending them in as we continue our coverage of Crew Dragon's maneuver to a new port. This first question comes in asking about the views that we're seeing. How come people in Space Station Mission Control Room are able to maintain live views of the International Space Station, but we can't? The answer is that the folks that you're seeing here in Mission Control Houston are looking at the same views that we are. So now we are getting the views from the outside of the International Space Station. Use some of the external cameras. You see here's a shot from the back of the room. We're now getting these views. Now, the space-to-ground communications, the reason we're able to get these views is due to a communications antenna that's located on the outside of the International Space Station, pointing towards the tracking and data relay satellites. Now, for a large portion of today's maneuver, some of those shots are going to be masked. The communication path between the station, which is 250 miles, and the geosynchronous tracking and data relay satellites, which are more than 22,000 miles from Earth. We mask off those areas to prevent any damage to the communication antennas, as they're sending high data rate radio frequency signals, where Dragon really is in between that communication path. So we wouldn't want the high data rate communication signals to bounce off of the Dragon back to the antenna and possibly affect some of the auto track sensors that are on the outside of the station. So the views that you're seeing are going to be periodic. We may lose them as we make our way to the new docking axis. But right now we're in the home stretch, getting some good views. The Cronus, the mission controller here in Mission Control Houston, is overexposing the image of the Dragon. You see it sort of very brightly coming into our view now. When the Cronus overexposes the image and increases the aperture of the station's cameras, you can start to see some of the Draco engines firing the different plumes. You'll see that coming out of Dragon as it makes its transition. That helps to stabilize the Dragon as it makes its way from one docking axis to the other. You can see them overexposing now.
If you look carefully at your screen, you can see the Crew Dragon capsule there firing its some actuation thrusters there to align for this autonomous procedure.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has arrived at the 60-meter hold point on Zenith, and Dragon is configured for docking. Confirm crew readiness for approach 1.
And we're getting views from the external cameras of the International Space Station. You can see the forward end of the Dragon right there, that soft capture ring fully extended. And the sequence for moving in from waypoint 2 to docking has begun. We're now inside 20 meters from the International Space Station. This sequence, as we move in, will take about 4 minutes until we get a contact and capture of the Dragon, bringing our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. Some of the calls you heard during this approach, we of course have Mark Van High inside the International Space Station monitoring the approach. Of course, with the 4 crew members of the Dragon itself inside watching the sequences here. The big loop you're hearing is a communications channel of the space-to-ground communications as well as Dragon-to-ground. So all the communications you're hearing is being heard by the ground teams here in Mission Control Houston as well as Mission Control in Hawthorne, and of course the crew inside Dragon as well as inside the International Space Station. We're now 15 meters and closing.
Love to see this view of the Crew Dragon approaching the space station autonomously, driving itself. If you recall from the previous version of the previous version of Dragon, the cargo capsules, they dock to the station actually not by docking but by berthing, which essentially required the robotic Canada arm to grapple the spacecraft and bring it to the station manually. So to see Crew Dragon, this upgraded version, flying on its own without any assistance and able to dock autonomously with the space station is an awesome capability that's just so great to see with our eyes here.
Meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
At 10 meters away from this vantage point, you see the Earth there in the lower left corner. We're now flying 262 statute miles over India.
Great shot of the forward.
5 meters.
Great shot of the forward end of Crew Dragon there. Located near the top are the forward Draco thrusters, which of course are not being utilized for today's maneuvers. All the maneuvers are managed with the service section Draco thrusters.
Crew hands off point, 3 meters and closing.
Hands off.
Copy, hands off. Soft capture confirmed.
Copy, soft capture confirmed.
And with that, we have a confirmed contact and soft capture. Dragon and station were flying 262 miles over western China. That docking time, 6:35 a.m. Central Time, 11:35 GMT.
Soft capture ring retraction in progress.
Never copy.
Upcoming, the teams will command Crew Dragon to begin the hard capture by commanding the hooks. Again, they will operate in 2 sets of 6, so a total of 12 hooks. Will hook in and close, and we'll have confirmation of hard mate complete. There on your screen, a shot of both the pressurized and unpressurized sections of Crew Dragon. The pressurized section being the conical portion at the top. That's where the crew is currently sitting in their seats. And the bottom half is the trunk, and that's where we place unpressurized cargo, such as the International Docking Adapter upon transportation from Earth to the International Space Station. That's where those were placed for transportation to station, where they were then removed and installed in their now permanent homes. The trunk will be jettisoned whenever it's time for Crew Dragon to return home. and allow the heat shield at the bottom of the pressurized section to be exposed and allow the Crew Dragon to splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean.
Dragon SpaceX ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Never copy.
With that side view of Crew Dragon, we have a great shot of the service section Draco thrusters that I mentioned earlier. They're the portholes there on the side of Crew Dragon. That is where the thrust comes out from the Draco thrusters, and those are the service section thrusters that we utilized for today's port relocation maneuvering.
Station Endeavor on the big loop. MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Mission copies.
Never copies.
With the soft capture ring retracted before the hard mate sequence can begin. Again, there are 12 hooks that are going to secure Crew Dragon Endeavor to the International Docking Adapter. Teams here in Mission Control Houston configured the International Space Station to be on control moment gyro. Attitude control. Now that it's switched over to control moment gyros, they can begin the hard docking sequence with driving of the first set of hooks. They're going to drive 6 at a time to make 12 hooks total, securing the Dragon Endeavor to the International Docking Adapter. And with that, we have confirmation that the first set of hooks are driving. International Space Station, NASA astronaut Mark Van High closed the hatch on the station side, the APAS hatch, after fixing a docking target. The crew was suited up, performed leak checks in their SpaceX spacesuits, and got ready for an undocking of the original docking ports, where Crew Dragon Endeavor was just about an hour ago. The Crew Dragon Endeavor and the 4 crew members inside, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, Thomas Pesquet, and Aki Hoshide, undocked at 5:45 a.m. Central Time about an hour ago and made the transition to the new docking port, making contact and capture with the port that you're seeing here, the Zenith or space-facing port, at 5:35 a.m. Central Time, completing the 50-minute maneuver from the original docking port to its new home, making room on the forward harmony part for the Boeing CST-100 Starliner to dock here in next week. July 30th is when it's set to launch, making contact and capture with the International Space Station set 24 hours later, July 31st.
At this point in time, the first set of hooks have closed and the second set are driving. Again, there are 12 in total, and they operate in 2 sets of 6. And we're waiting for confirmation of the closure of the second set of hooks.
Endeavour SpaceX on the big loop. Hard capture is complete. You are go to raise your visors.
Copy, hard capture complete. Visors up.
And with that, we have confirmation that the second set of hooks has finished driving. So all 12 hooks now securing the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station. Teams here will now undergo a series of steps to pressurize the vestibule in between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, just like we saw earlier during today's coverage with the depressurization of the original docking port. We'll see everything in reverse to allow the pressurization to equalize, making sure everything is good before opening up the hatch and letting our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. So now that the Crew 2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Aki Hoshide have redocked with the International Space Station, we're going to wrap our live coverage of Dragon's second port relocation maneuver. The crew will take some time now to get out of their suits and begin the process of opening up the hatches in about 2 hours. As mentioned earlier, the relocation has freed up Harmony's forward port for the docking of another commercial spacecraft built to carry humans, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. This will be Boeing's second test flight of Starliner without crew, as they seek to put the spacecraft through all the phases of a mission before flying people inside of it for the first time. It's set to launch from Florida's Space Coast on July 30th and arrive at the space station about 24 hours later on July 31st. Once Starliner arrives and docks, we'll have another historic first, with 2 commercial spacecraft built to fly humans docked to the space station at the same time.
Meanwhile, Crew 2 will remain on station until this fall. Crew 2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur, JAXA astronaut Aki Hoshide, and ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet are targeting early to mid-November for a return to Earth inside Crew Dragon Endeavour off the coast of Florida. But before they go, NASA's SpaceX Crew 3 mission will launch and arrive with NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Tom Marshburn, and Caleb Barron, as well as ESA astronaut Matthias Maurer. So we'll have another full house with 2 Dragon crews docked to the space station at the same time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Docking sequence is complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to dock your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be changing cameras to external only.
Copy all. Docking system complete. We are go to dock suits. Arthur, thanks to you and your team and all the folks in Houston who got us here safely back on the station.
So again, with those words from the crew and from here, Mission Control Houston, and the teams, of course, over at Mission Control Hawthorne, that'll wrap up our coverage for today's port relocation maneuver. Crew Dragon Endeavour now hard-mated to its new docking port on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. That's it for the action for us during this operation, but there's more to come. Later today, we'll provide coverage of the launch. We'll hope you join us, of course, for the upcoming coverage of some of the Russian operations, and of course for the launch of OFT-2, Orbital Flight Test 2, of the Boeing Starliner later this month, and again this fall for a lot of upcoming operations, including cargo missions. We have the Northrop Grumman 16 mission and the SpaceX CRS-23 cargo mission, and of course our crew operations for Crew 2 and Crew 3 activities in the fall. Until then, so long.